Good morning. I am Patrick Natal, the Executive Director of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and on behalf of our 146,000 civil engineers who are members of ASCE, I'd like to thank you for joining us today to discuss this important topic of infrastructure. Today, the American Society of Civil Engineers issues its latest report card on America's infrastructure. Today, we will release updated grades for the 15 categories of infrastructure and an overall grade for the nation. We will also present our recommendations for key solutions in addressing our infrastructure needs. Our comprehensive report is still scheduled to be published and released in March as originally planned. With us today is Wayne Klotz, a civil engineer from Houston, Texas, and the president of the American Society of Civil Engineers. Second, Andrew Herman, the chair of ASCE's Report Card Advisory Committee, and a bridge engineer from New York. And finally, the governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. And first, we'll have President Klotz.
Thank you, Pat. ASCE's first report card in 1998 graded 10 categories of infrastructure and assigned an overall grade of D. In 2009, the overall grade for the nation's infrastructure is again a D, and the cost to bring up to good condition of all of the categories has risen to $2.2 trillion. In more than a decade, the United States has made no significant progress in improving either the condition or performance of our roads, bridges, water systems, or other vital infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers believes that restoring America's infrastructure to the level needed to support our economic prosperity, health and safety, and quality of life will require focusing on these key areas. First, we must establish reliable, dedicated funding sources. Second, we must eliminate the backlog of deficiencies. Substandard roads, bridges, water systems, and other infrastructure systems drain resources, inhibit commerce, and threaten public safety, welfare, and the environment. And finally, we must agree on how to prioritize and fund strategic new investments in infrastructure.
Thank you, Wayne. And now I'd like to introduce Andrew Herman, the chair of the American Society of Civil Engineers Report Card Advisory Council.
Thank you, Pat. As you know, the report card for America's infrastructure assigns letter grades in each of 15 categories of infrastructure. Although I'll be happy to answer questions on any of those specific categories later, right now I'd like to simply highlight a few areas. In assigning grades, we consider several fundamental criteria. These include capacity, or the ability of the system to meet user demand both now and based on future projections. The second criteria is condition. Condition is also evaluated and reported using common industry standards. The Council also considers knowledge of dynamically changing conditions, either improvements or declines, not otherwise captured in the condition reports. The third criteria is funding. We assess current and anticipated funding levels against estimated needs. Operations and maintenance is the fourth criteria. We review whether there are deficiencies that threaten the system or whether it is appropriately maintained to ensure future performance. Finally, we consider public safety and resilience. Although these criteria require more subjective judgments than the others, they're very important, can directly impact a grade. For example, serious deficiencies within a dam could cause loss of human life with little warning, warranting consideration in the grade. In terms of specific category grades, there has been little noticeable change, and unfortunately none of it good. Just one category, energy, improved, raising its grade from D to D+. Within the surface transportation categories, both roads and transit continued a steady decline that dates back to 2001. Transit fell from a C- to a D+ and finally to a D in 2009. And roads fell from a D+ to a D and now a D- this year. Drinking and wastewater systems did not fare much better. Both held steady at a D-. Although Americans still enjoy some of the best tap water in the world, the cost of treating and delivering that water where it's needed continue to outpace the funds available to sustain the system. Many systems are more than 100 years old, and leaking pipes lose 7 billion gallons of clean, treated drinking water a day before it even reaches the consumer. Raising the grades on our infrastructure will require that we seek and adopt a wide range of solutions in every category, including technical advances, funding and regulatory changes, and changes in public behavior and support. The nation's infrastructure faces some very real problems that threaten our way of life if they're not addressed. While it may not happen overnight, these problems are solvable if we have the right kind of vision and leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And now I'd like to have Governor Rendell come up and give his side of the story.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to come and speak about infrastructure, which I say is the sexiest word in the English language. It shows you our problem. People have a tendency to glaze over when they hear the term infrastructure, and yet nothing can be more important to America's quality of life, its public safety, and its economic competitiveness. So, what do we do about this? Well, at all levels of government, we have to increase funding. We have to be innovative. We've got to make sure that we can find ways, whether it's by creating an infrastructure bank, whether it's changing and amending TIFIA, we've got to find ways to use private capital to be a part of the solution to coming up with the necessary funding for infrastructure. It is a very difficult task. You know, when the American Society of Civil Engineers came out with their 2004 report, I said, 1.6 trillion, could that be right? So I ordered all of the secretaries of the various departments in Pennsylvania to give me their estimate of what our own infrastructure gap was. Well, my secretaries came up with a report, and our infrastructure gap in Pennsylvania totaled $80 billion. Pennsylvania is almost in everything 5% of the nation. It was eerily correct. 5% of 1.6 trillion is $80 billion. So anyone who doubts the accuracy of the American Society of Civil Engineers report should not. And the fact that it has grown some almost $500 billion over the past 5 years should not be surprising to anybody, because infrastructure repair is like that old Fram oil filler commercial. For you older folks, you may remember it. The sort of scruffy-looking mechanic stands up and says, you can pay me now, and he's holding up a can of Fram oil filler for $17.22, or you can pay me later, and there's a broken-down car, and the screen flashes $4,300. But it's true. Costs for road construction have gone up by almost 40% in the last 3 years alone. They're not getting any cheaper. This is something we should begin now. If we delay, it gets more and more expensive. The older our infrastructure gets, the more expensive it is to bring it back to first-class condition. This is as urgent an imperative for the federal government and state governments and all of us as is health care or any other extremely difficult issues that the President and the Congress are facing. It's very, very important that that infrastructure box not get checked off. You can see that in the Surface Transportation Report. You can see it in the ASCE's report. Anybody who's looked at it, it says that that investment's necessary. We better get on with it, and we better get on with it now.